The night was cruelly cold, the kind that steals breath and mercy alike. In the dim light of a flickering street lamp, a man sat huddled against a cracked brick wall, his thin jacket barely a defense against the biting wind. His fingers were numb, his stomach hollow, and his spirit even emptier. The city roared with life beyond him, cars, laughter, footsteps, all moving past as though he were invisible. His name was David, once a man of promise and pride, now just another forgotten face in the endless gray of the streets. The cardboard beneath him bore the scars of many nights before, and in his eyes lived a quiet resignation, the kind that only comes when life has taken everything and left behind nothing but breath. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Light of Kindness. Your support helps stories like this one reach hearts that need hope. David had not always lived like this. Once, he had a home, a small but warm apartment that smelled of morning coffee and paint thinner from his weekend art projects. He had a wife named Clara, who used to hum softly while reading beside the window, and a daughter, Lily, whose laughter could light up the darkest corners of his life. He used to come home with tired hands but a full heart, believing that love was enough to carry them through anything. But life, as it often does, decided otherwise. It began with the accident. A simple drive home from work, rain tapping gently on the windshield, and then, a blur, a screech, shattered glass. He woke in a hospital bed to a white ceiling and the terrible stillness that followed. Clara and Lily were gone. Just like that, his whole world was buried beneath a sheet of cold inevitability. He screamed that day, not just from grief, but from the unbearable silence that followed it. After that, the world lost its color. He stopped painting, stopped working, stopped trying. Slowly, life slipped through his fingers like sand, until there was nothing left but the streets. For years, he wandered from shelter to shelter, his soul eroding a little more each winter. He stopped looking people in the eye, their pity hurt more than their indifference. Every night, he'd curl up beneath the same lamppost and watch the city lights blur into a haze of memories. He'd whisper his daughter's name sometimes, just to remind himself that he had once been someone's father. One bitter evening, as snow began to fall, David's strength finally failed him. He sank onto the pavement outside a small cafe, shivering violently, his vision dimming at the edges. Inside, warmth glowed like a dream, families laughing, cups clinking, the smell of fresh bread drifting out each time the door opened. And then, a figure appeared. A woman in her 30s, carrying a bag of groceries and a steaming cup of coffee, stopped abruptly as she noticed him. She hesitated for a moment, caught between the rush of her own world and the quiet suffering before her. Then, without a word, she crouched down and handed him the cup. Her name was Anna. She had seen him before, always in the same spot, always looking smaller against the cold. "You should come inside," she said softly, her voice trembling as if she was afraid of breaking the fragile moment between them. David tried to speak but only managed a weak nod. She helped him up and led him into the cafe. Heads turned, some with discomfort, others with quiet sympathy. The owner, an older man with kind eyes, didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and pointed toward a corner table. Anna bought him soup and bread, and as the warmth returned to his hands, something began to thaw inside him, a faint, forgotten feeling. She didn't ask about his past, nor did she offer pity. Instead, she talked about small things, how the city always looked softer under snowfall, how her grandmother used to say that compassion is just love with work clothes on. David found himself listening, even smiling faintly, though the muscles had almost forgotten how. When he tried to thank her, she only said, "You don't owe me anything. Just, be warm tonight." Before she left, she handed him a folded note and some bills for the shelter down the street. On the paper, she had written, "You are seen. You are not forgotten." That night, as he lay in a real bed for the first time in months, those words kept echoing in his mind. He didn't know why they mattered so much, but they did. Something inside him stirred, a fragile seed of hope, fragile but alive. Over the next few weeks, Anna visited the cafe often. She always looked for him, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just sitting and talking. Slowly, David began to share pieces of his story, the accident, the loss, the endless years of emptiness. Anna listened with tears in her eyes, never interrupting, never judging. She told him about her own struggles, too, how she'd grown up in foster care, how kindness from a stranger had once saved her when she thought she couldn't go on. It was then David realized that compassion was not about fixing someone, it was about sitting with them in their brokenness until the light found a way in. One day, Anna asked him to help her at the community center she volunteered at. It was a place that offered meals, clothes, and shelter to the homeless. At first, he refused. "I'm not someone who helps," he said quietly. But Anna smiled and replied, "Maybe you're exactly the person who should." The first time David stepped into the center, he felt like an imposter. The smell of fresh soup, the chatter of volunteers, the laughter of children, it all felt foreign, like sunlight after too long in darkness. Yet as he started stacking boxes, handing out blankets, and meeting others whose stories mirrored his own, something inside him shifted. He saw the same pain he had once carried reflected in their eyes, and he began to understand the power of being seen. Week by week, he returned. The center became his refuge, his purpose. He painted again, this time, murals on the center's walls, splashes of color that told stories of hope, loss, and rebirth. People began to recognize him not as the man on the corner, but as Mr. David, the quiet artist who made the walls come alive. Children would watch him paint, their laughter echoing through the hall. And every time he looked at them, he felt a warmth he thought he'd never feel again. Months passed, and the city bloomed into spring. The cafe owner hung one of David's paintings by the door, a simple image of two hands reaching toward each other in light. Beneath it, Anna had written in small letters, "Where compassion lives, miracles begin." David began leading art workshops for people who had lost their homes or families. He taught them to tell their stories with colors instead of words. He told them, every brushstroke is proof that you're still here, still fighting. And as he watched them create, he saw the same spark that Anna had lit in him now spreading through others. But compassion, like all beautiful things, asks for courage. One night, David found a young boy sleeping by the same lamppost he once called home. The boy couldn't have been more than 13, his face pale from hunger, his eyes haunted by a fear David knew too well. Without hesitation, David took off his own coat and wrapped it around him. He led the boy to the shelter, stayed until morning, and promised him he'd never be alone again. That moment changed him forever. He realized that true healing doesn't come from being saved, it comes from saving others, even in small ways. Years later, the community center expanded. They built a small art studio in David's name, calling it the Light Room. On the wall above its entrance, in bright paint, were the words he lived by, "Where compassion lives, life begins again." David stood there one evening, watching a group of children painting under the golden light of sunset. He felt tears fill his eyes, not from sorrow, but from the sheer beauty of knowing that love had found him again, in the unlikeliest of places. The streets had once taken everything from him, but compassion had given it all back, differently, quietly, beautifully. He turned to see Anna standing beside him, her eyes glistening. "You did this," she whispered. But David shook his head. "We did," he replied softly. "Compassion did." That night, he walked past his old lamppost, the one that had witnessed his darkest days. The snow began to fall again, soft and silent. But this time, he didn't feel the cold. He reached out, brushed the flakes from his sleeve, and smiled. Somewhere, in that quiet street, he could almost hear Lily's laughter again, light, free, eternal. And for the first time in years, he whispered into the night, "Thank you." Dizzy, if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Light of Kindness. Every click helps spread love, empathy, and second chances to more souls who need them. Folded hands before you go, take a moment to comment below, tell us what compassion means to you.